Welcome we're in da dumalang molo sa bono hukandat, and a warm welcome to the Enduvo Knowledgecast, the podcast where your curiosity meets insightful conversations. No muzi rico amba, a lekker discussion. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that's like the Podjiso's recipe for South African businesses working together. IFRS 11, all about joint arrangements. Think collaborations, partnerships, ventures where everyone's got a hand in the pot.
Spot on. You know, whether it's our mining giants teaming up for a mega project or a tech startup in Joburg partnering with a Silicon Valley giant, IFRS 11 sets the rules of the game for how these lekker partnerships are reported financially.
Right, because clarity is key, especially when you've got multiple companies bringing their A game to the table. So we've got IFRS 11.pdf right here ready to break it down. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, why is this standard so important for us here at Migzansi?
Well, think of it this way. As South African businesses spread their wings globally, IFRS 11 becomes our passport to transparency. It's like speaking a common language, ensuring that everyone, investors, stakeholders, potential partners, can clearly see how these joint arrangements are structured and how they're performing financially. It builds trust and smooths the way for international business deals.
So it's all about keeping things hunky-dory on the financial front, making sure everyone's singing from the same song sheet. Now, IFRS 11 itself has a bit of a history, right? It didn't just magically appear overnight.
True that. IFRS 11 has a story to tell. It's been on a journey evolving over time to keep pace with the ever-changing business landscape. It started way back in 1990 with IS31, went through a few makeovers, and finally transformed into the IFRS 7 we know today in 2011.
So like a fine wine, it's gotten better with age.
Absolutely. Those revisions weren't just about changing the label, they were about addressing the limitations of the old standard and making sure it was robust enough to handle the increasingly complex world of joint arrangements. For instance, IS31 had a limited scope and didn't always provide clear guidance on key aspects like joint control.
Okay, that makes sense. So before we go any further, let's get the basics straight. What exactly does IFRS 11 define as a joint arrangement?
At its heart, a joint arrangement is when two or more parties, companies, individuals, you name it, come together and share control over a specific activity or venture. It's like a stokvel everyone contributes and has a say in how things are run.
A stokvel where profits are the shared goal, and that shared control bit. What's the deal with that?
Joint control is the secret ingredient here. It means that no single party can make major decisions about the joint arrangement without getting everyone else on board. Everyone has to agree, unanimous consent, just like in a good indaba.
So everyone has equal power. No one can boss the others around. I like it. But this is where it gets interesting, right? IFRS 11 doesn't lump all joint arrangements together. There are different types, aren't there?
You're sharp. IFRS 11 distinguishes between two main flavors of joint arrangements, joint operations and joint ventures. And knowing the difference is crucial because it affects how companies report their involvement financially.
Okay, let's break it down. What's the deal with these joint operations? Can you give us a relatable example?
Imagine two construction companies in Durban. Let's call them Mzansi Builders and Africa Construction, joining forces to build a massive new waterfront development. They pool their resources, think bulldozers, cranes, skilled workers, and share in the risks and rewards of the project. That's a joint operation, direct collaboration, hands-on, sharing the tools and the responsibilities.
So it's like a bring-and-buy of construction equipment and expertise, working together to create something awesome. Makes perfect sense. Now, what about these joint ventures? How are they different?
Think of joint ventures as more focused on the financial outcome. Let's say you have a dynamic South African fintech startup that's developed a brilliant payment app. They partner with a global tech giant who brings their international network and marketing muscle to the table. The goal is to launch this app globally and share in the profits. That's a joint venture.
Got it. So in a joint venture, it's less about sharing resources and more about sharing in the success of a specific project.
Yeah.
They're both invested in the venture, but their involvement might be different.
Precisely. And that difference is key because it determines how they report their involvement in their financial statements.
All right, now we're getting to the heart of it. So how do companies actually go about reporting these different types of joint arrangements according to IFRS 11?
That's where the real meat of IFRS 11 comes in. For joint operations, each party rolls up their sleeves and recognizes their share of the assets, liabilities, revenues, and expenses directly on their books. It's like dividing the pot equally. Everyone gets their share of the ingredients in the final dish.
So with our Durban construction example, Mzansi Builders would report their portion of the costs, like the cement, the labor, the crane rentals. And their share of the revenue from the waterfront development.
You've got it. It's about transparency, showing exactly how each party is contributing to and benefiting from the joint operation.
And what about the fintech startup and their global partner in that joint venture? How do they report things?
For joint ventures, things are a bit different. They typically use what's called the equity method.
Equity method. Sounds a bit technical. What does that mean in plain English?
Imagine you're looking at a beautiful panoramic view, rather than focusing on every single tree and rock. The equity method is about looking at the big picture. Instead of listing every single asset and liability, the focus is on the overall net assets of the joint venture.
So the fintech startup would be reporting their share of the overall value of that app venture, rather than the nitty-gritty of development costs or marketing expenses.
Exactly. They are reporting their share of the venture's overall success.
So there's a method to the madness. But why go through all this trouble? What's the bigger purpose behind all this detailed accounting?
It all boils down to trust and transparency. IFRS 11 ensures everyone has a clear picture of the financial health of these joint arrangements. Investors can make informed decisions, partners can work together effectively, and the business world becomes a more reliable and predictable place.
So IFRS 11 is like the Ubuntu of the business world, promoting fairness, transparency, and harmony. Everyone wins.
That's a fantastic way to put it. But hold your horses, because things can get a tad trickier when we start talking about acquisitions and transactions within these joint arrangements. It's not always as simple as splitting the potchi equally.
Sounds like we're about to spice things up a bit. Bring on the complexity.
You're right, let's add some chilies to this potchi. Imagine our solar panel company from earlier, the one making waves in the renewable energy space. Let's call them Sunny Skies. Now they're part of this joint operation to get those panels onto rooftops all over Mizansi. They've contributed our $10 million worth of cutting-edge equipment to the venture.
Okay, so Sunny Skies is really putting their money where their mouth is, showing their commitment to clean energy.
Absolutely. Now let's say the other players in this joint operation, perhaps an installation specialist and a financing partner, have a combined ownership of 60%. This is where IFRS 11 gets specific. Sunny Skies can only recognize a gain of our $6 million on this transaction.
Hold on, why not the full? Or $10 million, they put in the full value of the equipment, right?
That's the key takeaway here. IFRS 11 says you can only recognize a gain proportionate to the other party's ownership interests. Think of it like this: Sunny Skies is essentially selling to themselves, since they still have a stake in the joint operation.
That makes sense. It wouldn't be a true reflection of the situation if they pocketed the full gain while still having a hand in the operation.
Precisely. IFRS 11 is all about presenting a fair and accurate picture. Now let's flip the script. What if Sunny Skies decides to buy installation equipment from the joint operation instead of contributing it?
Intriguing. So now they're on the buying side of the equation. What happens then?
IFRS steps in again with some ground rules. It says Sunny Skies can't recognize their share of the profit from that purchase until they sell the equipment to an outside customer.
So it's like a delayed cha-ching. They have to wait for the final sale before celebrating the profit.
Spot on. This rule prevents companies from inflating their profits by simply buying and selling assets within the joint operation. It ensures that the profit is only recognized when there's a genuine sale to an external customer, someone outside the family of the joint operation.
So it's all about keeping things kosher, making sure the profits are real, and not just some accounting magic trick.
Exactly. Now, IFRS 11 doesn't shy away from those what-if scenarios, those times when things don't go according to plan.
Like when load shedding hits and the demand for solar panels goes through the roof, or maybe the equipment gets damaged in a freak hailstorm.
You got it. IFRS 11 is all about being prepared. It requires companies to be vigilant, always on the lookout for signs that the assets tied to the joint operation might have taken a knock in value.
So no sweeping potential losses under the Kara rug. Honesty is the best policy, even when it's not the best news.
Absolutely. Transparency is paramount. IFRS 11 is very clear if there's evidence of a drop in the net realizable value of the assets or an impairment loss you have to fess up.
It's like that saying, the truth will set you free even in the accounting world. So what's the bottom line for South African businesses who are either already part of these joint arrangements or thinking about joining the Sakaville? What does IFRS 11 really mean for them?
If we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, IFRS 11 is like a detailed map for navigating the accounting side of joint arrangements. It ensures that financial reporting is consistent, transparent, and truly reflects the economic reality of these collaborations.
And that's key for attracting investors, building trust with partners, and creating a solid business environment. It's like laying a strong foundation for success.
Precisely. And here's the thing, IFRS 11 isn't just about blindly following rules. It's about understanding the principles behind those rules and applying them thoughtfully to real-life situations. That's where the real value lies.
It's like having the recipe for delicious pachi, but also knowing how to adjust the spices and ingredients to suit your taste and create something truly special.
That's a brilliant analogy. By grasping those principles, South African businesses can use IFRS 11 strategically to unlock new opportunities, navigate complex situations, and ultimately achieve their business goals.
So IFRS 11, it's not just a rule book, it's a tool for success. But we talked earlier about how this standard has evolved over time. It's had a bit of a makeover, hasn't it?
Indeed. It's gone from bell bottoms to skinny jeans, so to speak. And that journey is actually quite fascinating. In the next part, we'll delve into how IFRS 11 emerged from its predecessor, IAS 31, and why those changes were so important.
Sounds like we're about to take a trip down accounting memory lane. I'm ready for the history lesson when you are. All right, we're back and ready to unpack this history of IFRS 11. You mentioned it evolved from something called IAS 31. What's the story there?
So IAS 31, which stood for International Accounting Standard 31, was the original rulebook for reporting interest in joint ventures. It first came out in 1990.
Back when we were all listening to Brenda Fassie on cassette tapes and dreaming of a free South Africa.
Exactly. But just like our beloved country, accounting standards need to move with the times. The business world was changing rapidly, and IAS 31 needed some upgrades to keep up.
What kind of changes were happening back then that prompted these updates?
Globalization was taking off. Companies were forming more complex joint ventures across borders and industries. Those old rules were starting to feel like a pair of Veldskone trying to keep up with a marathon runner.
So IAS 31 went through a few revisions to get into shape.
It did. The first major revamp happened in December 2003. The International Accounting Standards Board, the folks in charge of these standards, decided to give IAS 31 a facelift and a new name. It became Interests in Joint Ventures.
So they made the name a bit more specific, no more beating around the bush.
Precisely. And it wasn't just about the name. This revision came alongside changes to other important accounting standards, like IAS 27 on consolidated financial statements and IAS 28 on investments and associates.
So it was like a whole team makeover,
Yeah.
making sure all the players were on the same page.
Exactly. They wanted to create harmony and consistency across the board, especially when dealing with the complexities of joint ventures.
And then came the big transformation into IFRS 11.
You got it. In May 2011, the IASB unveiled IFRS 11 joint arrangements. This wasn't just another tweak, it was a whole new standard, replacing IFRS 31 completely.
A whole new era for joint arrangements. What were some of the key changes introduced by IFRS 11?
One of the big ones was clarifying the definition of joint control. They really emphasized the importance of everyone agreeing, that Ubuntu spirit we talked about. It also drew a much clearer line between joint operations and joint ventures.
Right, we discussed those earlier. The bring and break collaborations versus the ventures focused on the pot of gold at the end.
Exactly. IFRS 11 provided more specific guidance on how to account for each type, promoting greater consistency and transparency. Everyone could see what was cooking.
So a major win for businesses trying to navigate the world of joint arrangement.
Absolutely. But the journey didn't end there. There have been ongoing updates and refinements along the way. Think of it like adding spices and adjusting the heat to get the patji just right.
So IFRS 11 is a living document, constantly evolving to meet the needs of a dynamic business world.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why it's so important for South African businesses to stay up to date. Those amendments we talked about earlier addressed real-world issues, like dealing with acquisitions of interests and joint operations, and ensuring consistent treatment across different situations.
So it's like a regular software update for the accounting world, making sure everything runs smoothly and keeps up with the latest trends.
Precisely. And it highlights that IFRS 11 isn't just a static set of rules. It's a framework that's constantly being refined to reflect the realities of doing business globally.
So as South African companies venture into the world of joint arrangements, they need to keep IFRS 11 as their trusty guide, ensuring they're playing by the rules, maintaining transparency, and building trust with their partners and investors.
Exactly. And remember, this is more than just about ticking boxes and staying compliant. Understanding IFRS 11 can help South African businesses seize opportunities, navigate challenges, and achieve their strategic goals.
It sounds like IFRS 11 is a must-have tool for any South African business looking to collaborate, partner, and thrive in today's interconnected world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into IFRS 11. A big thank you to our expert for shedding light on this important topic.
It was my pleasure. I hope everyone listening feels empowered to tackle the world of joint arrangements.
And remember, if you're a South African business involved in or considering a joint arrangement, knowledge is power. Take the time to understand IFRS 11, and you'll be well equipped to make informed decisions and achieve success. Until next time on the Indubo Knowledge Cast Hambakalia. Stay curious and keep those insightful conversations flowing.